Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. As you can see, the rest of the Users Group board is not here tonight, leaving me all alone, and I'm going to make that their mistake. We are going to go and not only go off the rails, we're going to start off the rails and maintain our course off the rails throughout the entire show. So, in case this is your first time here, Shop Talk is a place where it's Monday, it's hopefully after work for you. It's an opportunity to kick back and relax, maybe talk a few technical topics, sometimes try to derail me. Tonight, pre-railing, pre-derailing. There will be no rails, as Anders mentions. We're not even going to be on rails here. So we are going a full open map campaign, and to that extent, you can see I already have the browser tab ready to go. So I'm going to take myself out of the spotlight as soon as I say that, again, if this is your first time, mostly this is chat driven. So drop a message in chat. I will probably read it. I might read it out loud. I may mispronounce something. I may do that on purpose just to see it happen. But we also have a few topics, show topics. Fortunately, my intrepid co-hosts did not leave me utterly rudderless. And so we do have a couple of topics for the night, as well as whatever else people come up with. If you have questions, the official intent of this show is a little bit of Q&A, technical question and answer on a series of different technical topics. But there's also a bit of rambling and ranting about sundries. So let's get started on our rambling and ranting. And I have a good article from Pete Worden. This is a blog post, and I enjoy Pete Worden's blog. This is Why Has the Internet of Things Failed? Now, as I mentioned, I do like Pete's blog. I do like this blog post, and this is coming from the standpoint of somebody who works in the field of IoT and trying to understand, why is it that less than half of appliances that are internet capable ever get connected? My immediate response is, why is it that half of the appliances get connected in the first place? That seems like a bad idea. So perhaps we're coming at this from opposite angles, but I did find it interesting to see Pete's reasoning behind this. So the first one that Pete mentions here is setup, that we all have requirements on either Wi-Fi or cellular connections, and for setting up your refrigerator or setting up an on-screen a device that doesn't have a full user interface, you may have to download a phone application and configure that and have to manage it. Or you may have to try to work on a small screen, like a touch screen on a device. And that will immediately take some of the people out of the picture. I think that's a fair point. The ability to interact with the device either is going to be somewhat technical and drive away probably a large percentage of the not highly technical audience. It will be moderately technical in the sense of install a phone application, in which case you're having to trust a developer of a phone app and hope that that phone app isn't malicious or doesn't do anything bad. And if you get a new phone, you have to remember, oh, well, do I need to get this app again or not? You may have to configure things. You may have to set up the device in a special way. If you think about guest networks versus regular networks, etc. Anders' point actually ties in with number 2, uselessness. It's nice when my dryer tells me when my clothes are dry, but I will survive without it. And the answer is yeah, you will, because most of these things doesn't really matter that much. So, smart dishwasher that could be connected to the internet. None of the team had been able to figure out a compelling user benefit for the system. You could start a dishwasher remotely, but you have to be there in person to load it. So why not just start it then? And you can make an argument about, well, I want to load it when kids are asleep, and then when they go off to school, have the dishwasher kick off. But that's what timers are for. So, we've had a solution for that for decades that didn't require an internet connection. Most of the stuff that you see is I can turn on the system, I can turn off the system. Well, what else are you going to do with the device? If I have a humidifier or a dehumidifier or an air conditioner or whatever, do I really need a separate phone app and constant internet connectivity to be able to turn on the device? Because we've had remote access to devices for decades without needing those capabilities. And uh, I don't think it's a big loss or a loss at all. So I do believe uselessness here is a powerful argument. There are some situations where, yeah, it can be useful. Actually, best case is like my car, where it will send me a message when I leave the door unlocked, which is good because it's easy to leave the doors unlocked. And, you know, actually, it leads to one of my undying critiques of this, which is if you know that you should send me a message that my door is unlocked, why can you not give me an option automatically to lock my door instead of making me lock the door by pushing the button to say, go ahead and lock that door? Why not just auto lock when I close? Because I have the keys. I can unlock it if you auto locked inappropriately. But the likelihood that I'm getting out of the car with the car off and I don't want to lock the doors is probably fairly low. Door locks or garage door alerts that you forgot to close it when you left the house. Yeah, that could be useful. Those are the types of things where possibly. Now, Pete's third concern here is energy, and I don't really care about that. What I care about is I'm going to do Control F, except you can't see it, but I type in the letter SEC, and what do I get? One hit, and that's the word seconds. There is nothing in this blog post about security, or specifically the lack of security that IoT devices have. That you are putting stuff on the broader internet and you're enabling access remotely. This is exactly how you get devices that get hacked. This is how you get inadvertently malicious devices. You get baby monitors that anybody can eavesdrop on if they know the URL. You get all kinds of terrible security practices because hardware manufacturers tend to be awful developers. They tend to have, at best, mediocre firmware and usually terrible firmware. And then the software that they either develop in-house or outsource to another company is almost uniformly miserable. So to expect there to be any sort of security basics on an IoT device, I don't trust that at all. I don't trust that as soon as I turn this television on, it's not going to start sending out information that I don't want to send out, or maybe even getting hacked and being an endpoint for a malicious user to expand onto my network. And so that, I think, is the big concern, and it's not even on here. The other big concern is there's very little benefit in it. So I do believe those are the two biggest reasons: is lack of security, meaning that a fair number of the technical people don't trust the thing, and lack of compelling use case as to why I need this. I don't need a refrigerator to be internet connected. Oh, it can tell you when you're out of milk. So can I. And I can usually do a better job of that than the refrigerator. Also, my refrigerator is more likely to be part of a botnet than I am. So, I got that going for me. Even my 2009 Chevy locked the doors if I walked more than 20 feet away from the car with keys in pocket. Exactly. This is not a thing that you need internet connectivity for. There are really few compelling use cases. And to the extent that I even like the idea of IoT, my argument is that should be entirely on network. It should be the intranet of things, not the internet of things. It should not require that you're connecting out to some third-party server in order for you to get the capability that you expect. And the problem, one of the big problems that you see with this is, oh, well, you bought this light bulb that's $20 and requires an that requires an internet connection. We're shutting down the service because the bulbs didn't make enough money. So, sucks to be you. Whereas I bought the cheap light bulb. That cheap light bulb doesn't require an internet connection. Guess what? Company goes out of business. I don't care. I still have light. You might not want your data tracked or collected. Yeah, that's a huge thing. That is the missing part on here. That's the part of the security argument, and I'm 100% on board with that. So, again, if I buy light bulbs from a store that are not internet connected, that I don't have to provide information on what I'm doing, where I'm using them, okay, that's a lot better than paying for the internet light bulb that is going to eventually go down when the company says, we're not making enough money on these bulbs anymore, so we're just going to shut down the servers. I understand that there are internal applications that you can run to host some of these devices, and sometimes companies are smart enough to support these internal applications to allow you to have an IoT hub internally. And I'm kind of okay with that as a general principle, where my applications are not directly connecting out to the network, and so there's no information going out that way. And instead, within my own Wi-Fi, I can connect to a hub that has access to these other endpoints and can perform operations. That's a lot less onerous of an idea than what we get in practice, which is, you're constantly sending packets out to some EC2 hosted server, and better hope that EC2 hosted server never goes down, or else your device will stop functioning the way you want it to. So checking out Marshall, if they don't put any features in it to be able to initiate something remotely, then there's less concern about someone getting access to it, and often the excuse used to not bother with security aspects. I mean, I think the excuse for not bothering with security aspects is security is hard, and we're never going to lose customers because of a security failure. I mean, Sony proved that 12 years ago. Who stopped using Sony products because of the constant rash of security problems? You turn around, everybody's got security problems, because this is one of those battles that I think we generally lost, is privacy and security. And maybe this is why Pete doesn't have it on here. Maybe this is my bugbear and not something that general people care about, which is unfortunate. But I think for a lot of people, the answer was, I don't really care. Oh, I feel bad. I feel angry that the company lost my information. But, that's the fourth time this week that it's happened. So at this point, what am I going to do? Okay, I want to be tracked how I get good ads. You still get bad ads. The advertising is not better. I mean, look at Amazon. If you buy something on Amazon, what is the first thing that you get advertised? It's the exact same product. Like, oh, hey, you bought a toilet seat. Congratulations, you're now a toilet seat aficionado. People like you buy these other toilet seats. I'm like, no, they don't, because I just bought one. People don't go around collecting these. These are not Beanie Babies or some Funko Pops or whatever. These are a thing that I put in. I buy this thing once every few years, and that's it. But no. Amazon now will just blast you with advertising about toilet seats for the next 3 months because, man, you must be really into these things. All right. Marshall says, for that light bulb example and centralized service shutdown breaking the end unit device, see the Chumby among many examples over the years. Yeah, there have been a lot of cases. Oh shoot, I remember that really awful juicer. There was one where you had to buy. It was supposed to be this amazing juicer, and you bought these packets, and it turned out that the packet was actually pre-juiced. So it was literally just a packet of juice that the juicer would then squeeze, thereby giving you juice. And that thing was also internet connected. It required an internet connection to squeeze juice from packet. It's a mad world. Data retention laws are another battle we arguably lost. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And this is, yeah. Was it the Juicero? That's right. Thank you, Marshall. That was the amazingly awful idea where it was also like a $500 juicer, and it would only work with its own packets that themselves were way overpriced for what was, again, pre-juiced juice. So it was a juicer that did not juice. All right. Come on. Friend said over Teams she had been playing pickleball. Now I've been getting pickleball ads on Facebook for a week. And I don't see you as a big pickleball player, Anders. There's also it that just leads into its own realm of scariness around. Oh, well, I was having a conversation in Spanish and suddenly all of my advertisements are in Spanish. I was having this conversation with a friend, not over the internet, just in person. And then we suddenly start getting ads. Oh, no, don't worry, your devices aren't listening in on you while you're not telling them to. I remember reading articles about that over a quarter of a century ago with BBSs. It's all been downhill from there. I agree. Subscribe and save on toilet seats. I mean, that's a possibility. I like that idea. Maybe I need to replace my toilet seat every month or so. Maybe get like 5 of them a month just in case. This was work Teams, work laptop, and just thinking about that this is supposed to be, you would think, a fairly private network, except guess what? You have access to the internet, and you have access to your data getting sold. And this is probably why my employer has a crappy IM system, because it's one that won't resell that information, mostly because you can't really have conversations using the product because it'll kick you off every 12 seconds. We all have IoT microphones in our pockets. Yes, we do. And so that's where you get to. I just had a conversation with a person and suddenly I'm getting advertisements about this thing. It's a mad world. It is a mad world. And Pete's summarization here, he's still optimistic about the future of embedded technology. I'm not. I go back to the classic joke. Actually, I need to find the joke, but it essentially goes along the lines of the technical enthusiast who has a copy of every brand new system and will tell you about all these amazing things and what's hot, what's bleeding edge, what's coming out. And meanwhile, the developer is the old crusty guy. The newest thing he's got is a printer from the year 2000, and he keeps a shotgun by it just in case it ever makes a noise he doesn't expect. Time to go live on the farm. Oh, wait a minute. IoT devices all over the farm. Yeah. And for corporate, and okay, so this is the funny thing. For corporate scenarios, IoT can make a lot of sense. For farming, it can make a lot of sense. There are practical utilization vectors for farming. Now, at the same time, I also hate, this is going to get me on a right to repair rant. I hate how John Deere is making it impossible for anybody to repair one of their very expensive pieces of farm equipment without going and paying extra to go through John Deere. But yeah, planner reporting into planning software and vice versa, for sure. And even just, keeping track of even just the path that you're taking as you're running the harvester or the combine, or the information if you do a flyover with a drone over the property, over the farm, to figure out, do you need to spray any crops? That kind of stuff. I love the idea. That's also the type of thing that I would ideally like to have as local as much as possible, versus on a public network, or maybe having to go over the internet to a company hosted server, because those companies do either go bankrupt or they drop support for products. They say, well, we'll support this thing forever. And then, well, like a Nest thermostat, not anymore. You'll have to buy the new product. You'll have to buy the new combine that's only $750,000. So some of it is, but a lot of it is on SD cards that get uploaded to home. Yeah, and that I am 100% okay with. I mean, I'm even okay, like I said, I'm okay with internal networks. You've got some sort of local hub device, and by hub, I mean not the networking hub, but the centralized location, centralized storage and compute that sits on your machine or on your premises, and that isn't going away. You have ownership of it. It is yours. All of the devices are interconnected and communicating over that internal network. And honestly, I would rather have that be separate from regular connectivity over Wi-Fi or wired for regular devices. Yeah, I think that should be some level of network isolation. And your hub could have two network cards. You can be on two networks. You can have the internal network for all of the communications, and then an external network, which is your home network, where you could communicate with it when you're another device on that network. As practical matters go, I mean, this is not really that challenging of an idea, but what it means is you're not sending a bunch of information that somebody can resell. Polish train locomotive right to repair issue. If you're not familiar with that one, I am not. They monitored the location of locomotives. If they went to another repair place, they remotely disabled the locomotive and tried to cover it up. That is just something amazing. Now, I'm not Lewis Rossman. Lewis is much better at ranting about this stuff than I am. But wow. This does sound a lot like, actually, first thing it reminded me of was Samsung phones, where if you took your Samsung phone and got a third-party repair, then Samsung authorized repair shops were required to inform Samsung and brick your phone, which to me says, I'm pretty sure that's a violation of the law, the Magnuson-Moss Act, which is law in the United States. So I'm pretty sure that's illegal, but you got to actually get charged with it and go through the criminal process. But it is nice when John Deere calls you and tells you to shut down that $1 million combine right now because an engine's about to blow up. I mean, that's true, but yeah, at the same time, if that information is local, it could still alert you. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a person calling you and telling you that, oh, well, based on the information that we're seeing on our servers, why could that not be information that I have available to me that I can see? And if you're following the same set of rules of, oh, well, if you see this pattern, then things about to blow, then you could also have that be locally tracked. AI at its best, though. And yeah, some of this stuff that we're talking about, yeah, it's harder, maybe. I'm willing to give it that much. Although I probably, if I think about it longer, and I'm not just going off the cuff here, I don't know that it's that much harder. You may have some hardware requirements locally. You might need, a GPU, but then again, you can run simple forms of AI models on phones. You can run it on ARM processors. You can run it on the CPU. So you can do CPU based inference. Yeah, it may be slower, but depending on, and also for many cases, your AI model is a linear regression. You have a linear regression. This is not only is it not AI or machine learning, it also is not CPU intensive. And quite often, linear regression is all you need. Hey, we see this line. That line means things about to blow. And that may be all the information that your fancy pants model actually needs. At which point, again, we don't need expensive servers to host this. once again, our usage patterns and preferences are the product being monetized, even when we pay for products and services. NanoDBA, you've got it absolutely right. And that's a point of frustration, I would say. Um, I don't want to be the product when I'm paying for the product, and I should be able to own the product and know that the product will remain mine, as opposed to I bought this thing. Well, you didn't really buy it. You bought a license to use it until we decided that it's not worth it for us to continue allowing you to use it, at which point it's gone. In that case, don't tell me that I bought it. In that case, tell the truth that, yeah, you're going to rent this until we brick it 3 years from now, because that's the expected lifespan of the product. Except they're not going to say that, because, well, then people wouldn't buy the product, and that would be counterproductive. So them's the breaks, I suppose. But yeah, that definitely, I expected this was going to already take me off the rails, but this definitely took me even further off the rails than I expected. So I got that going for me. Our next topic, probably much less of a rail breaker. This is in the, wow, this is still around category, and that is system.data SQL client. That package is now being deprecated, is officially on the deprecation list. And admittedly, I have some fond memories of system.data.SQL client from like 8 years ago. Microsoft.data.SQL client has been around for 5 years. At this point, I'm not sure that there's much left in system.data.SQL client, the NuGet package, that is not in Microsoft.data.SQL client. Every .NET development piece of work that I've done that requires a SQL client in the last few years has supported Microsoft.data.SQL client, with the exception of an object relational style mapper in F#. That one, as I recall, because it was old .NET framework and really hadn't been updated in a while, that one still, as I recall, needed system.data.SQL client. So that may have been my one exception. But even so, I could be misremembering. We could have switched over to Microsoft.data.SQL client. I honestly forget. Nonetheless, if you are still using the system.data.SQL client package, then just note that in the next couple of years, so I got that going for me, exactly. So over the next couple of years, expect that this package is going to get less and less love and will eventually go away. And so before .NET 9 becomes GA, they will publish a new Microsoft.data.SQL client package that removes support for earlier versions of .NET and old versions of .NET Framework, and will support .NET 8, which is the current long-term support version of .NET, Framework 4.6.2 and later, which, I mean, Framework 4.8 has been the legacy final version of .NET Framework for a while. So, and also .NET Standard 2, which that was a fun thing while it lasted. After the .NET 9 GA, no change. Will not support system.data.SQL client for new users. Oh, sorry. This is actually the deprecation process. So basically, system.data.SQL client will have these changes after .NET 8 goes end of life, which will be a couple years from now. We'll remove support, maintain support for a framework, etc., etc. Microsoft.data.SQL client, as I recall, does not support .NET Framework. It is .NET or .NET Core, which became just .NET. So if you are still using Framework, then yeah, you'll still need this system.data.SQL client package for until you transition. But essentially, otherwise, system.data.SQL client going away. And as a note, this does not refer to the namespace. So the namespace of system.data.SQL client in .NET Framework is still around. It's the NuGet package that you would install that provides access to SQL Server or other relational database using the like ADO.NET style connectors. So replace references with a Microsoft.data.SQL client. Replace and test your application. My recollection was the interfaces are very similar, if not the same. Is this a good time to mention that SQL 2019 goes out of mainstream support in less than 6 months? Yeah, it's time. It is time to think about that. And also, SQL 2016 is going the 2012 route. So for the people who are like, I've got a fairly new version in SQL Server 2016, that is going to the point where the only support you're getting is if you're in Azure in also 6 months or so. So yeah, 2014 is already on the you're too old list. 16 is going to be there soon. It's 8 years old at this point. Extended ended July 14th. Yeah, that sounds about right. So basically, if you're running 2016 or earlier, it may be time to upgrade. Now, I know that there are still a good number of complaints about, 2022 was not really a good release in terms of stability. It was a really good release in terms of, there we go. So it was a really good release in terms of neat functionality for T-SQL. No, I was just busy banning somebody. I don't need spammers when I am the spammer. So that was less me derailing or Andrews derailing me and me just getting caught up, incapable of doing two things at once. But I would actually consider that apropos, the going out of mainstream support. So it's more like, instead of derailing, maybe we just switched tracks, but switch to a similar track going in the same direction. Basically, keep your stuff up to date. All right. Our next topic. So we're 2 topics down. I probably should have spent more time on that system.data.SQL client, but topic number 3, this comes from Mala, who could not be here tonight because she has actually decided to get into the world of professional wrestling. And so, mind you, there's wrestling, there's wrestling, and then there's wrestling. And Mala is definitively on the wrestling side. Absolutely getting the luchador mask and everything. So she's got that going on, which meant, unfortunately, she couldn't be here tonight. So we're going to have to cheer her on as she enters the squared circle. Just say no to full text indexes. I don't disagree, Anders. I do not disagree. Every time I've tried to use full text indexing in SQL Server, it has not worked out the way I've wanted it to. And it's kind of a shame. But it's just what happened. It is complete and utter garbage. Also, the cow pun there, it also works. Nonetheless, Mala has apparently been doing some stuff around full text indexing and wanted to send this link. And, I didn't have much else to talk about. So I was going to talk about some of these common causes of performance issues, like using full text indexing. Hardware resource issues, CPU, memory, and disk. Okay, I'm not going to make fun of the article. I don't know who wrote the article or who has contributed to it. Hey, there's Randolph. So Randolph West has been involved in updating this article, which means you can give Randolph grief about the existence of full text indexing. I think that's what it means. But you may want to look at, hey, are you taking 100% of CPU with your full text index? Because, yeah, that would be a problem. If there's a shortage of physical memory could be a bottleneck. Yeah. If the average disk waiting queue length is more than 2 times the number of disk heads, there is a bottleneck on the disk. That sounds like we're talking old spinning disks here. And it makes me wonder, when was the last time that this section was updated? Because, beginning in SQL Server 2008, the full text index can use AWE memory because full text is part of the SQL Server.exe process. AWE memory, wasn't that for 32-bit processing where you got that extra gig of RAM so that you could do 3 gigs instead of 2? Somebody in chat who remembers, let me know if I was right about that while I quickly Google it. Because addressing Windows extensions, yeah, AWE, 32-bit Windows applications. So if you're still running 32-bit Windows, well, as of SQL Server 2008, which, mind you, has been off the books for a decade at this point. Like if you're installing SQL Server 2008 on purpose, that's something. That's amazing. It's not good amazing. It's why amazing. More amazing in the sense of, why would you do this to me? I thought we were friends. But the note is correct, I'm sure. But I now question, when's the last time this has been useful to somebody? I also wonder what if Mala may have sent this to me. Okay. I was seeing if she sent it to me on a lark. But no. This was 100% serious, just like how Mala is becoming a luchador. 100% serious. If there are no hardware bottlenecks and you're using a SQL Server from the last 15 years, indexing performance matters based on how long it takes SQL Server to create those batches and how quickly the filter daemon can consume those batches. Okay, that kind of makes sense. And the answer is a long time and not very. Just in case. There will be a quiz on this later. Why am I trashing full text indexing so much? Nobody asked that in chat. I think you all know why. But the reason I'm trashing full text indexing so much is it's not good. And I don't mean not good in Elasticsearch is better than this type of way. Yes, Elasticsearch is better for text search. Now, Elasticsearch is way worse for analytics and roll-up of metrics, but it is much better for processing and searching through text. That is kind of what the Lucene indexing mechanism is great at. This does not work well with large amounts of data. And by large amounts of data, we could be talking hundreds of thousands of records that are several thousand bytes. So we're not even talking about 20 gigs or 100 terabytes of data. We could be talking about a couple gigs of data, and full text search can choke. Luckily, I can import the indexing while attaching 503 2017 databases to a 2022 server. Oh boy. So wait, part of your availability group there involved also full text indexes. That seems like something. Not something. Yeah, no wonder you dislike it. Okay, full text index population issues. So you may note that various types, incremental, manual, and auto change, are not designed to maximize hardware resources to achieve faster speed. What that's a fancy way of saying is they're slow. Tuning the performance of full text indexes. You can set max full text in crawl range to the number of CPUs on the system. So that way you can make sure that you blow out your CPU utilization. Make sure your base table has a clustered index that is an integer data type. Avoid using GWIDs as the first column in a clustered index. That's generally good life advice. A multi-range population on a clustered index can produce the highest population speed. We recommend that the column serving as the full text key be an integer data type, or I suppose it would also be a big int or something. So a numeric data type that's in the integer family. I need to forward that section to our devs. Developers actually can't read. It's a actually fairly well-known fact. Literacy is part of the test to become a developer, and if you accidentally show that you're illiterate, you lose the job. So I had to fake illiteracy a few times. GUIDs clustered everywhere. And they're probably also debating whether to call it a GUID or a GUID. And that's probably why they just stuck with the unique identifier as a clustered index, because they couldn't decide how to pronounce it. And if you can't even pronounce it, then no way can we remove it. Update the statistics of the base table. More important, update the statistics on the clustered index or the full text key for a full population. Okay. Yeah, keep stats up to date. That seems reasonable. Temporarily limit the size of the buffer pool by setting the max server memory value to leave enough memory for fdhost.exe to run. So now we're talking about make the rest of your server perform worse so that this thing doesn't perform worse. And I suppose here's where I'll lay it out, that if you know you're going to have full text indexing, that you should pre-allocate some certain amount of memory and just leave that available for the full text filter service, the filter daemon. That may work better instead of temporarily limiting your max server memory while you're doing reprocessing. I mean, I get, if you have a limited amount of RAM, I mean, even if you do get all the way up to 3 gigs of memory on your server, in that case, maybe you do want to lower your buffer pool to like 128 megabytes. But again, on a reasonable system, you should prepare for these sorts of things. And I don't think shrinking the buffer pool is a smart thing to do. Build a secondary index on the timestamp column to improve performance of incremental population. Okay. I mean, again, this seems like a lot of this is older advice. You can review the full text crawl logs so you can see exactly why things are going so slowly. Check physical memory usage. You can run low or out of memory, and it will give you error messages, so that's good to know. And as I scroll along through here, estimate the memory requirements. So how much memory do we need in bytes? Number of crawl ranges, which is the number of CPUs, times the ISM size, 4, 8, or 16 megabytes for any computer you should hopefully care about, times the max outstanding ISMs, 5, times 2. So wait a minute. Let's say I have 16 CPU cores, times, let's make this, I don't know, 8. So that's 128 times 5, or times 10. So we have 1.2 gigs. So this is the amount of memory that the FD host requires, 1.2 gigs. Why am I shrinking max server memory again if I need 1.2 to maybe 4 gig? Maybe 2 gigs. 64 times. So this would be, yes. Okay. So if you have 64 cores, all right, 64 cores. I don't know what the physical memory, I don't know where that cap would be. That's why I estimated at 8. And then 5, but don't forget the times 2 here, Anders. So it's actually times 10 instead of times 5. But yes, if you have 64 cores, then that's a little bit more. Now you're talking 10 gigs of RAM, but again, this is depending on the total physical memory. It's somewhere between 2.5 and 10 gigs of RAM. My rough estimation would be 5 to 10. Call it like 5 to 8. Nonetheless, that's with 64 cores, and assuming that you want all 64 cores to crawl. So if you limit yourself to 32 cores, congratulations, you just cut the memory requirements in half. So yeah, I don't see this as particularly onerous in terms of memory. That if you're running full text indexing, you should be able to scrounge up 4 gigs of RAM without hopefully having to shrink your buffer pool. Would that be per database? I don't think so, because I don't think every database has its own fdhost.exe. This is its own separate daemon. So I don't believe that there's one per database. There might be one per instance of SQL Server, but that I'm not sure of, because I am I'm anti named instances at this point in my life. I am definitely on team just build me a separate VM. I'll have to log in and see. Yeah, that would be interesting to check out. But my belief is no, it's probably one FD host. And for estimating memory requirements in MB minus F1, estimate of the memory needed in megabytes. Okay, number of crawl ranges times 80. And max server memory is total physical memory minus FD host memory minus 500. This is old. This formula is old, because this is saying give Windows half a gig of RAM. It'll be fine. As a spoiler, for modern versions of Windows, you do want to give it more than half a gig of RAM. 500 megabytes is an estimate of the memory required by other processes in the system. If the system is doing additional work, like Windows, increase this value accordingly. So increase that value accordingly. So we have some examples here. If you have a 64-bit processor with 8 gigs of RAM and 4 dual-core processors, so like my desktop computer from 15 years ago, somewhere around there. Although I'm pretty sure I had 16 gigs of RAM then. 8 times 10 times 8, 640 megabytes. Our max server memory is 7 gigs. My watch has more than that. You're not wrong. Also, I would never have set max server memory to 7 gigs on a Windows machine for any version of SQL Server if you have 8 gigs of RAM. Because even as SQL Server memory loving as I am, and wanting to maximize how much memory SQL Server and the buffer pool get, for 8 gigs of RAM, I would leave at least 2 gigs for the OS. And as you increase that number, you increase a not quite proportional percentage, but there are other formulas. So this seems very old, and I don't think it was ever right. I think this was far too aggressive. As an idea, it makes sense. Understanding what are your actual needs, what do you have available, and can you calculate an estimation of what you're going to need? I appreciate that. I like the fact that there's a formula. I think that there should be more formulas and more specific guidance from Microsoft on here's a good setting for this, or here's how you can learn what is a good setting in your environment. Far too often we get, well, you'll have to figure it out for your environment. And then when the question of, well, how do I figure out for my environment? We start hand waving and saying, there are factors, many important factors. Okay, great. Tell me what they are. How do I calculate them? What do I do about it? Well, just set a random number, and if it looks good, pretend that that's what it was supposed to be the whole time. Welcome to cost threshold for parallelism, everybody. Big round number, everything's good. Which means now I need to pull that up. I am now searching for the Michael J. Swart article on cost threshold for parallelism, which is something that I know we've talked about on Shop Talk before, and I'm just dropping a link in here again. Let me see if there's anything else in here that's interesting. Troubleshooting the slow indexing of documents. Don't have so many words. Get rid of many words. Have your stop word be the entire English language, and then you're fine. Everything will be so much faster. So, Michael J. Swart, measure the effective cost threshold for parallelism. The default setting is 5, which is way, way, way too low. I have heard people at Microsoft argue, no, 5 is fine. 5 is a good number. No, 5 is not a good number. 5 has not been a good number since like that full text indexing article was relevant. So, should be raised, but how do we figure out what number to go to? And there are two good scenarios, two good things that I've seen. Number one, this article. Number two, in Grant Fritchie's book on SQL Server 2022 performance query tuning, which I'll put a link in chat for that book because I like the book. On page 688, there's a really good calculation for how to determine your cost threshold for parallelism. So that's page 688. How do I know? Because I just recorded a video recently where I went over a review of this book. That's coming out on the YouTube channel next Tuesday. We just talked about how we didn't read. Developers don't read, Marshall. So yeah, you don't. Technically, it's not that you don't read; it's that you're not literate. So slightly different story. Don't read is just a choice. But no, this is an excellent book if you are involved in working with SQL Server 2016 or later. And I will have a full review of it on Tuesday. So not tomorrow, but next Tuesday. Unless you're watching this episode well into the future, in which case, what are you doing? But it will have been a prior Tuesday. Unless you're watching it next week, in which case it'll be tomorrow. This time is all very complicated. Just basically, there will be a review. It's a good book. You should buy several copies of this book, although it is $54.99. So you could maybe wait until it's on sale. Don't tell Grant I said that. All right, back to Michael's article. I should run this query against one of my larger servers. Yeah, this is a good query. This is basically looking at where your cutoff is for the cost of parallel queries. And so you can take this, and it's coming from DM exec query stats, and you're grabbing query text and query plans, and then looking at the SQL text as well as some of the information on the simple nodes, statement subtree cost. So where last DOP is greater than 1, in other words, your parallel queries, and query hashes match up, and you have at least 10 executions, order by subtree cost. Good Lord, how long will that take to run? I don't think it'll take that long to run. I have run it on busy servers, and it doesn't take that long. So in my case, I have relatively few parallel queries, only about 300, so XML parsing runs pretty quickly. 32,000 plans, that may take a little longer. But, what else are you using the server for? I mean, your customers can wait. That's fine. Okay, so what do? You keep track of the queries whose estimated subtree cost is below the new threshold you're considering. In other words, if maybe you're thinking about 50, you'll look at this and say, how many of these things have estimated query cost under 50? And in that scenario, then you'll see, okay, well, these things would be switched to single threaded plans instead of parallel. Is this parallel a thing applicable to Azure SQL Database? Yes. Azure SQL Database has basically the same engine for determining parallelism and optimization. The optimizer is, I won't say it's exactly the same because there are minor differences, in part because they can test things out in other versions of Azure SQL DB. So even though it's a server level setting, let me double check, but I'm pretty sure Azure SQL DB, you cannot change cost threshold for parallelism in Azure SQL DB. So it is a server level setting. You're right, Anders. The query itself would still work. It would still tell you how things would look if you could use cost threshold for parallelism. But yeah, you're right. You can't actually change it on Azure SQL DB. Which, although, let's see, alter database scope configuration. I now have to see if there's a database scope configuration. No, there is not. Okay. So yeah, that's going to be server level. That's something Microsoft controls, which means that this thing will only matter if you're on a SQL managed instance or uh, SQL Server on premises. Can you show which site you're checking? In other words, for determining Azure SQL database support, that is the Microsoft Learn article. And one of the important things to note is configure cost threshold for parallelism applies to SQL Server. So it does not apply to Azure SQL database. That is Microsoft's official way of saying no can do. And then this is from a couple years ago, Stack Exchange, DBA Stack Exchange. Somebody asking, hey, can I do this? And the answer from Teob is no dice. So no dice on getting this for Azure SQL DB. But if you're on premises or VM in the cloud or Azure SQL managed instance, what you can do is make your change. So you went from 5 to 50, and you can measure the cost of those queries afterwards. And what Michael found, actually specifically 5 to 50, is that almost all of the queries that he ran, this is from a couple years ago, but almost all of the queries that he ran improved in performance. So a few of them got worse, but many of them became significantly better. So this is a multiplicative chart, meaning, and here I'll zoom in on the chart. There we go. So multiplicative chart, meaning that this query got more than 3 times better, and he had 20 some queries that got at least twice as good just by setting cost threshold for parallelism, not doing anything else. 44 queries were at least 1x better is how I'm reading this. So his log times improvement, meaning that if it took 1 minute beforehand, I actually have to think about the math on what the subsequent time would look like, because 0 here seems to be this performed exactly the same as before, and the negative would be you got worse. So a few of the queries did get worse. Some things that should have been in parallel, but had a relatively low cost because maybe stats were different, or it was a not complex query, but had some interesting trick to it that made parallelism particularly beneficial. Regardless of the reason, there were a few that got worse, but for the most part got significantly better in terms of performance. So that's a nice way of showing, hey, here's how we can do it. And there are a few other ways to do this as well, but it's a nice way to wrap up the show. So we are nearing the top of the hour, and I think we've hit almost all of the things that I wanted to talk about. The one thing that we did not hit, I guess we're going to have to talk about that next time. But quick reminder, we do have our data science and business intelligence meeting tomorrow, unless you're watching this in the future, in which case it's not tomorrow. But John Kursky is going to talk to us about how to weave data ops into Microsoft Fabric. You can register for that at meetup.com/trypass. I just dropped a link directly into chat with the meeting itself, the event itself. But come check us out. It's going to be at this same Twitch channel tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there. But if you're not going to be there, it's okay. But still, it would be nice if you were there. Nonetheless, we're going to wrap things up for tonight. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for making chat fun today. And until we see each other in a future episode of Shop Talk or Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group or wherever, everyone, take care.